Hello and welcome to episode 21 of the Mad Knitting YouTube channel. It is Monday, July 18, and it's been a little while since I've made a video. My name is Susan. My pronouns are she, her, hers. If you're wondering why I introduce myself with my pronouns, it is to express my support for the LGBTQIA+ community, especially non-binary and trans people for whom pronouns are sometimes a difficult issue. I will put a link to a good article about that in the description box below in case you have more questions about that. But that's come up in a few comments, so I just thought I'd put that out there. It has been more than a month since I last put out a video. That really wasn't intentional. Some things just sort of came up. My last video was in the middle of June, and at the end of the month we left on a 2-week vacation, and it was my intention to do a short episode to put out right before we left, but the day before we left, which was the day I planned to do a recording, was the day that the Supreme Court decision overturning Roe v. Wade happened. And I did not have it in me to make a video about knitting on that day. It was, even though we knew that decision was coming, it was really just a punch to the gut, and it was just a really difficult day to get that news. That the issue of reproductive health and reproductive rights hits me very personally. I'm sure that's the case for many of you. If abortion is not an issue that affects you directly, I have no doubt that it affects somebody close to you, somebody you love, somebody you know. And just to put this out there one more time, I want to state unequivocally that I fully support reproductive rights and bodily autonomy for everyone. And the decision to overturn Roe v. Wade really sets us back. So anyway, that was a difficult day. I did not feel like making a recording that day. And then the next day, we left for vacation for 2 weeks. We were actually in Iceland. We left the country, and it was a great trip. Few bumps along the way, but anyway, didn't record then. And one of the things that we came home with on that vacation was COVID. So my son got it about halfway through the trip, mild case, but still took him out for a couple of days. And then at the very end, a couple of days before we left, the rest of us got it. So I've been recovering from that. You can probably hear it in my voice. Excuse me. And yeah, anyway, all that added up to 4 or 5 weeks in between episodes, which was breaking my streak of recording every other week. Anyway, I think I have not yet mentioned where you can find me online other than here. You can find me on Ravelry, if that is a site that is accessible to you, as madtownmama. You can find me on Instagram as madtown_mama. And I'm not often on the Making app, but you can find me there as well as madtownmama. So I mentioned that we went to Iceland. That was a fantastic trip. This is not a travel vlog, so I don't want to go on and on about the things we did and the things we saw, because I don't know that that would necessarily be very interesting to you all. But at the end of this video, for those of you who are interested in watching, I will put a few of the clips that I took. Just, you know, there's stunning landscape everywhere we went, so I found that in addition to pictures, sometimes it was nice to just sort of pan the scenery with short videos. So I'll stitch some of those together and put that at the end. It's a stunning country, beautiful, odd. There are all these odd places. You know, Iceland is unique for its geothermal activity, and they've got active volcanoes, and so there's just these weird places in addition to being very beautiful. So anyway, it was really, really neat, really fun place to visit. There were sheep and there was yarn, but I think I'll talk about that later. So one of the reasons that I bring that up is because, as you know, I knit all the time. If my hands are not busy doing something else, like on a computer or in the kitchen or at the piano, I am knitting. So that includes travel. I knit a lot when I travel, and especially when you have a transatlantic flight and a whole bunch of time in the car. I was not driving. We rented a car, and it's a lot more expensive to add a second driver. So my husband was driving, so I sat in the back seat and knitted a whole bunch. So I did not bring any of my works in progress on the trip because they were just too bulky, and I didn't want to have to follow instructions, and there wasn't going to be a good way to block anything. So I left those things at home, and I brought along some yarn that did not take up very much room and that I could knit up without having to follow a pattern or complicated instructions. So this is pretty typical of the to-go knitting I have. Things that I take along to meetings or concerts or events, that kind of thing. So it's a lot of simple stuff, but I will share what I made. So the first thing is a hat. This is yarn that I had left over from a pair of socks. I made those socks in April for a birthday present for a friend of mine. This is Utopia Wisco sock in the color City Lights, I think. And of course, the way the color stripes and pools is much different on this hat than on the socks because there's a different number of stitches. So the way I do these hats, I've made a lot of hats like this, and I found that I need about 50 grams, maybe a little less, of sock weight yarn. And what I will do is get size 3 needles, and I will cast on between 130 and 140 stitches, depending on how much yarn I have and how big around I want it. And I just do knit one, purl one, rib for a long time, longer than you think, because the hat, even though it's long, you lose some of that length when you stretch it out to fit over a head. So I do that until I have just a little bit of yarn left, and then I do decreases at the top. And depending on what mood I'm in, I will either do a 6-point decrease where I divide the stitches into 6 sections and just knit 2 together at the beginning of each of those sections all the way around. So you get this, I don't know how well you can see, kind of this star wedge thing going. Or sometimes I will do a 4-point decrease. So that's even more rapid where I will divide the stitches into 4 sections and do a double crease at each one of those. So double decrease, I mean, so that it really is pretty flat at the top. For this, I did the 6-point decrease. And this hat, I was hoping to make it long enough to have a brim that would turn up. I think for a head slightly smaller than mine, like if this was on a child, maybe it would be long enough for that. It's not quite, but as it is, for me, it works as sort of a slouchy hat. I think I look kind of funny in slouchy hats, but this one sort of works. Or if it was on a head a little bigger than mine, like if my husband or son wanted to wear it, it would fit just like a beanie without turning the end up. So this is the first project. This is something, I don't even have to look at it usually when I'm doing knit one, purl one. So this is a great thing to do on a plane, in the back of a car, when you're sitting in a room with a sick kid, which I had to do for a day. So that's the first finished project. That went so well that I cast on a second hat. Same method, same number of stitches. I did the same thing, only as you can see, this one is a little bit longer, just because I think I must have had more yarn left. So this one will fit a bigger head or could turn up a longer brim. This is yarn, I don't even remember what excuse me, I don't remember what this is left over from. Either another hat or a pair of socks. It's yarn I've had for a while. It is from 3 Irish Girls. It is Adorned Sock, I think. I left my label somewhere else, but it's the color Cognac, which is a nice, kind of a dark caramel color, orangey, rusty brown. I don't know, I really like it. So it's maybe 20% nylon and 80% superwash merino wool. But I don't have anything groundbreaking to say about this. It's same thing, knit 1, purl 1 until I had just a little bit of yarn left. Then I did 6-point decrease at the top. This hat fits me really well if I turn up the brim. It would fit a larger head, certainly. It's a color I think that is pretty gender neutral as long as somebody likes rust. So that's the second project I finished. The other project that I knit on this trip was a pair of socks. I brought along enough yarn for 2 pairs. I always come over prepared. I also brought enough yarn to make a shawl, and that we'll discuss in a bit. But I brought along 2 sets of Felici sock yarn from Knit Picks. So one, I'm really sorry I keep clearing my throat. I will try to keep that to a minimum. One set is this colorway called Red Rocks, which I showed you in the last episode, because I do want to make a pair of socks out of it. It's a lot of bright yellows and oranges and pinks. And the other colorway is called Psychedelic Sunset. And that's what I used because I decided that I should make socks for my daughter. And when I showed her the different options of colorways, she decided she liked Psychedelic Sunset better. So here they are. As you can see, Felici is a self-striping sock yarn. This is a very fun, bright colorway. It's basically a rainbow, and the blue color is double wide. It's like there's like a double stripe of blue. And as you can see, I also did not bother to try to get the stripes to match. It just didn't seem worth the trouble, and she didn't seem to mind. So the way I do socks for self-striping yarn, I always do socks cuff down. As I've said, that's just my preferred method. Once I did toe-up socks and I hated it. Never doing it again. So I start at the top. For my daughter's feet, which are bigger than mine, I cast on 72 stitches with a size 1 needle. I did knit 2, purl 2. For the cuff, then I switched to plain stockinette. When I asked her how long she wanted the cuff, and when it was about at that length, I did a short row heel. As you can see. The other option, I think, for self-striping is to do the afterthought or the forethought heel, where you either put the stitches on scrap yarn and pick them up later, or you can cut them in. I've never actually done that. But short row is easier for me because I don't have to go back and think about it. It's just done. And then for the toe, I do toe decreases every other round, and when I'm down to the last 16 stitches or so, I knit 2 together all the way around and just pull the yarn through rather than grafting. I've said before that is how I like to do toes now. It avoids the annoyance of grafting, and I think it fits the foot very well. So now my daughter has a new pair of socks, which she doesn't need to wear for a little while because it's mid-July and it's pretty hot. I thought she would need to wear these in Iceland. That's why I made her a pair, because she had not brought warm socks along. And our first day, when we got there, we flew into Reykjavik, and it was so cold that day. It was really windy. It was cloudy. It was sort of spitting rain, and our hands were freezing, and we had brought hats and jackets and stuff, but I was a little worried that we weren't going to be dressed warmly enough for the trip. That turned out not to be the case. The weather was actually really pretty nice just about the whole time we were there, but I thought she would need warm socks, so that's why I offered to make her a pair that she ended up not needing. So those are my finished projects. Those were not things that I had planned necessarily. They were the night before we left. When I was packing, I was finding, just looking through the scrap yarn I had and the sock yarn I had, because it packs pretty small. And I knew what needle sizes to bring and stuff. So that's my travel knitting. And those are my finished projects. I do have some works in progress to share. These are from before, so you've seen these before. I think I'll start with the Buffalo Rose Tea. I don't have a lot of update on that because I haven't picked it up in a while. But I think the last time I talked about this last month, I was in a quandary about the neckline. So there's this whole issue with this pattern when it comes to the whole top part of the design. Okay, so let me back up. This is the Buffalo Rose Tea. It's a design by Carol Chan of Casey Knitting Co. I wanted to make it because this colorwork pattern along the body is so brilliant. There's a giant buffalo plaid, there's roses overlaid. It was not easy color work to do because there are long floats. For this whole middle section with the roses, you're carrying 3 yarns at a time. I learned the ladder back jacquard technique, which I showed you before. I won't explain it again, but I'll show you the inside. So you can see the guts of the sweater. That was all great. When it came to the top part of the sweater, I had to do a lot of adjustments. The sleeves were too big, so I had to do fewer stitches on the sleeves. And then she didn't include any neck shaping at all. And I wanted neck shaping. So it took me a few tries. I'm not sure this is really what I'm settled on. I had tried doing some short row shaping. That didn't really work. It was still too high in the front. I eventually ripped back beyond the final decreases so that I could bind off some of the middle stitches on the front and then continue going back and forth, continuing those decreases. And I like what I came up with. I think it's possible that I didn't pick up quite enough stitches on the neck because the neck band itself it's not tight, but it's pretty close. When I last tried it on, I couldn't decide if I liked it or not. Like, I thought, this might be kind of a nice vintage style small neck, or it might be too small. So I have to decide. But if I redo it, the only thing I would have to pull out is the neck band itself, and just pick up more stitches. I think what I did to bind off the front and the decreases and stuff, I think the neck opening is good. I just have to fix the neck band. And then while I'm thinking about that, I'll just go ahead and finish the sleeve. So I've got one sleeve partway done. I decreased too fast, so I pulled out the sleeve and started it over, but that's not a big deal. Plain sleeves are not difficult to figure out. So that's the Buffalo Rose Tea. Hopefully I'll finish that soon. I find that if I have a work in progress that's lingering for too long, sometimes it will sit for years before I finish it or just not get finished at all. So I am motivated to get that done soon-ish. I mean, I won't have occasion to wear it for a while because it's pretty warm. But that's how the Buffalo Rose Tea is going. Second work in progress, this one's nearly done. I almost counted it as a finished object. This is the Heart of Glass pullover by Mary Annarella of Lyrical Knits. And wow, you cannot see it very well because the light's coming through. So this is, I'll pop a picture so you can see the pattern photos. It is a top-down design. You can choose your length. You can add sleeves or not. I think I've decided not to add sleeves. There's no change to the arm opening with sleeves or without. And it's such a well-written pattern and so thoughtfully done. It's a little complicated at the beginning because you're starting at the top and you have to do short row shaping for the shoulders and for the neck, but it makes it so that it all fits and sits very nicely. You go back and forth until you get to the bottom of the armholes, then you join it up and knit in the round to the bottom. And then at the bottom, there's this really lovely lace pattern. Come on, focus. There's this really lovely lace pattern. So I had the yarn I used. Okay, let me talk about the yarn I used. It is called All Hemp 6. I've had it for a really long time. I bought it many years ago, intending to do a different project. Didn't materialize. And I think I talked in a previous episode about how the gauge, it was really hard to get gauge. I ended up going down to a size 2 needle to get what was equivalent to a sport weight gauge. So that was the case when I was working back and forth. Normally, I don't have a big discrepancy between going back and forth and knitting in the round with gauge changes. I know that's a big difference for some people. Ordinarily for me, I don't have to worry about it. With this yarn, it made a huge difference. I joined under the arms and I was knitting on my merry way and I got a few inches down and I was like, wow, this is different. It was obviously much tighter once I started knitting in the round. Like, it just was not gonna work. I actually tried it on, it was way too tight. Actually, the armholes were a little too tight, so I figured out I needed to rip back and make them just a little bit longer. So, all that to say, I ended up ripping back, and then once I joined it again in the round, I went up to a size 3 needle, and it seems to have worked out very nicely. I tried it on before blocking it, and it fit really, really well. So that problem was solved. Because this is hemp yarn, I think that's the reason the gauge was so different, because, I mean, hemp is the fiber that is used to make rope, like rope that you would use to tie things. I don't know. What do you use rope for? Anyway, it's a very strong fiber. It is very inelastic. It was more pleasant to knit with than I expected. But still, it was very inelastic, and I think there must be such a difference between my tension purling and knitting that with an inelastic yarn, it was just so much tighter when I was only knitting because I was in the round. And I expected that after washing this, I threw it in the washing machine with a load of laundry and then just hung it up to dry. I expected that it would get more, that the stitches would even out more than they did. It's better than it looked, but it's still, I don't know, it doesn't bother me really, but it's still kind of rustic looking. And the lace, I really expected that would like flatten out and just sort of like what happens when you're knitting with wool. I expected that it would just smooth out and open up, and it didn't. It stayed just as wrinkled and kind of bunched up as before. So before it was completely dry, I put it on my ironing board and pressed it with a really, really hot iron. Like I do that with color work. I've talked about that before. And it helped. but it's still not quite as smooth and flat as I expected it would be. So I guess that's just how this is gonna look. Maybe after a couple more washings, it'll flatten out even more. But it's interesting. It's my first time knitting with hemp yarn. I don't think I've ever knit with 100% linen yarn, but I expect it would behave in a similar way. The reason, by the way, this is not a finished object is because I have one more little step to do, which is pick up all the stitches around the neckline and then purl a couple of rows and then bind off. So that's the final step. I mean, I actually think the neckline looks fairly good as it is, but I'm gonna go ahead and finish that, and then I will call it a finished object. And then maybe I'll actually wear it on my next episode so you can see how it looks. I said I was undecided about sleeves. I have one whole skein left over, so if I wanted, I could do like a little cap sleeve, but at this point, I'm thinking I'll just leave it the way it is. But anyway, this is my Heart of Glass Tea, nearly finished object. The last work in progress I have is, here we go. In my last episode, I talked about wanting to start this. So you've seen the yarn already. I wanted to make a shawl using these yarns, and I had to decide which shawl to make. So these are from Knit Circus, which is a company local to me. They were started in Madison a long time ago, and they are still here. They just closed their brick and mortar store in order to expand their wholesaling business. I expect they didn't get a whole lot of walk-in traffic. And I know that they've always had a big online presence. So you can still do curbside shopping if you're local, like make an order and pick it up, but they don't have a walk-in brick and mortar anymore. So a few months ago, they had some stuff on sale, and I'm kind of a sucker for Knit Circus, especially when they have stuff on sale. So I went in there and I picked these up off the sale shelf. This is a gradient. I think it was a mist-dye. I'm not sure what the flaw is, but I think it's beautiful. It's called My Funny Valentine. So it goes from a very, very dark, almost magenta, to a brighter, like Pepto-Bismol pink in the middle. Normally I'm not a pink lover, but I really like this. And I really liked it in combination with this, which is called, I actually have the label here. It's a discontinued dye lot. That's why this one was on. It's called Plenty of Fish. And it's, on this base, it's like a really, really pale sea green. And it just goes so nicely with the dark fuchsia magenta color. And the base is Opulence, which is this merino cashmere nylon blend, fingering weight, that just is so, it's one of my favorites. I really like how it takes color. I like how it feels to knit. It feels really wonderful. Like I've made a baby sweater, I've made a hat out of Opulence. I made another shawl that I gave to my sister-in-law, and it's just lovely. So I was trying to decide, do I want to make another of the same pattern that I had used Opulence for before, which is called At Dawn by Hoki Locatelli, or did I want to make a new pattern? And I chose the latter. This is, I'm halfway through. Oh no, I've dropped stitches. Shoot. I'll fix that later. So I'll very carefully hold up. This is the Livy Shawl by Tammy Gore. And because I'm mid-row and losing stitches, I don't know if you can see it very well, but I'll put a picture up so you can see. So it starts off in this arrow shape, this deep V shape. It's mostly garter stitch. Here's a section with some eyelets. And it eventually is asymmetrical. So eventually your decrease is no longer in the center. I don't know how to describe it. move off. Let me, but it's a lovely pattern. It's well written. It's very relaxing to knit because it's garter stitch. So you just have to keep track of the right side and making sure you're doing increases and decreases in the right place. But other than that, it's nice and meditative. So I don't even know who this is going to be for. It's just what I'm working on. So those are, let me just make sure. Oh, I have one more work in progress. This is almost not even worth showing, but this week, you know, we got home. My husband, daughter, and I were all still getting over COVID. My son had recovered, and fortunately he was testing negative, so he was able to go to a chamber music camp. And by Friday, I had tested negative, so I was able to go to see the concert that he participated in. It was very laid back. It was a participant concert for this music camp. And knowing that I would be sitting in one place for at least an hour, I needed something to knit and I didn't want to have to follow a pattern. So I just decided to start a hat. And I found some leftover yarn. I have a whole tub of leftover scrap yarn. Don't even know how to use it all up, but this is my attempt to start with that. And I found these two, which I had not even purchased together, but they are the same color. Like exactly the same color. So I don't know if maybe it was like in style. I have had this yarn for at least 15 years. I think I made a baby thing out of this. It is DK weight. I lost the label, but I think it might be like Debbie Bliss Cashmerino DK. She has this whole line of Cashmerino, or used to. So I have this. It's kind of a bluish lavender lilac color. And then there's a thorn stuck in it. Good grief. Independently of that, I had another project. I think this is from elon.com. And as far as I know, that website is defunct now, but it was their house brand of mohair silk. Maybe there's some nylon. I don't even know what's in it. Like I said, the label is long gone. But I'm holding them together. I started a plain hat. I cast on 100 stitches. On size 6 needle, I did the ribbing. I switched to size 7 and I'm just knitting up. I might run out. I don't think I'm gonna run out of the fuzzy part, but I might run out of this. If I do, I will find another color in the same weight and just color block, you know, just do a different color at the top of the hat because I'm interested in using this up. The fabric it makes is very, very soft. You can see there's a little bit of a halo. I don't know who this is for. I don't know if I'll give it away or keep it. I think because of the mohair, it would be hand wash only. So I'd have to be careful who gets it, but that's what I have going. So those are all my works in progress and my finished projects. I want to share just a little bit about the Iceland trip. Like I said, this is not a travel vlog. I think if I just started listing all the things we did and all the places we went, it would not be very interesting. But I will say that we were gone for 2 weeks. We spent one night in Reykjavik at the beginning, one night in Reykjavik at the end. Everywhere else, we were driving around. We visited 3 national parks. There's this area called the Golden Circle, which has sort of the most famous tourist spots. We saw a couple of those. One of them was like a whole area of geysers. Like there's this geyser that's always going and hot springs and stuff. There's a volcano crater we saw there was just the most incredible colors of rocks and moss and lichen and stuff. That was really neat. And of course there were sheep everywhere. Iceland, I believe, has more sheep than people. The sheep there don't have natural predators. The only predator in the country is the Arctic fox, which is way too small to take down a sheep. So the sheep were just kind of everywhere. And I was expecting to see more yarn available because I'd heard like, oh, in Iceland they have yarn in the grocery stores. I did go to one grocery store that had yarn, but it was like, I mean, we were sick actually. Like we had our masks on and we were just trying to get some food so that we could get to our rental place and just, isolate for the next day or so. But there was a yarn section. It wasn't very nice yarn. There was like a lot of, acrylic. They had just bags of let lopi like stacked in a shopping cart, very unceremoniously. I wasn't really interested in shopping for yarn. A, because everything in Iceland is so expensive, and B, I didn't have room in my luggage. But it was just interesting to see how it was just sort of tossed in this area of the supermarket where they had like plastic toys and wrapping paper and just like a bunch of random stuff kind of thrown in the back. There was the place we stayed in Reykjavik, was like not in the main downtown area. It was in this other business district, but it was right across the street from a yarn shop. But the day we got there was Sunday, so nothing was open. The next day we left before they opened, and like, y'all know that I'm obsessed with knitting and yarn, but I was traveling with people who are not, and I was not gonna like make them schedule their whole, I wasn't gonna try to schedule our whole travel around me wanting to see yarn in Iceland, especially since I think a lot of those shops, carry a lot of big brands that you can find anywhere, including the US. So anyway, we were going to stay at that same place our last night before leaving. So I thought, well, if we get to the hotel before the yarn shop closes, I can just pop over and have a look. Well, it turned out our hotel was overbooked that last night because they were hosting refugees from Ukraine. So they moved us to a different hotel. So then we spent a bunch of time like getting the car back and getting to our other hotel. And obviously, I was not going to be upset about being displaced in order to provide housing from people from Ukraine. So anyway, I didn't get to that yarn shop. But the one place I did visit, it was right off the main highway. It was the one place I said, can we please stop here so I can just have a look around? And they accommodated me. I cannot pronounce the name of this shop, so I will put it on the bottom of the screen because it was a very long name. Excuse me. And in Iceland, I think everything is hard to pronounce, but it was near Selfoss, and it's not a very big shop. And the woman who owns it, I think, raises her own sheep, and so that is the wool that is in there. She dyes the yarn herself. So there was some undyed yarn and there was some dyed yarn, and most of the dyed yarn was done with natural dyes, like indigo and cochineal and stuff. So I did make a purchase there. This was the only souvenir that I have from the whole trip, except for some chocolate that I bought in the airport to use up our cash. And it's beautiful. I'm really looking forward to knitting it. So I'll show you the undyed yarn first. I bought these two skeins. These are naturally colored, pure new lamb's wool. When I hold it, it doesn't feel very soft. Like, it feels pretty toothy. I think Icelandic wool is known for being very warm and very rugged, but not necessarily next to the skin soft. But when I put it like against my neck, it doesn't feel scratchy. Now, I'm not very sensitive to wool to begin with, but I expected it would feel scratchier than it does. So I have this, which is nearly black, and then I have this, which is gray. And these were very reasonably priced because they're undyed. I also bought two skeins that she had dyed. It's the same yarn, it's just dyed up. This one is done, I think, with indigo. This one my daughter picked out because it's the same color as her hair. So, of course I had to get it. I cannot tell. I'm not sure what she used to dye this. But I think it's natural dyes too. So my plan with this is to make mittens for my kids because they will wear handmade mittens. So I'm going to put these two together, the black and the orange. I will find some colorwork pattern. The proprietor of the shop actually had these kits with a star or snowflake pattern, and I wish that I had bought a kit. Like, she had these different natural colors. So if I'd bought the kit with these two colors and then bought the colored yarn, then I would have had the pattern. But as it is, I'll have to find a pattern on my own, which is fine. So I'm gonna put these together for mittens for my daughter because she likes to wear black all the time, and she picked out this color because it's the same color as her hair. And these are colors that my son wears all the time. This this is like a denim blue. It's showing up a little darker in the screen than, I don't know, can't get the color right. But this dark denim blue, sort of a bright, dark denim blue with the heathery gray will be for him. So, hoping to finish those around Christmas time. So this is the one purchase, it was worth it. I only spent like 20 minutes in that shop because I didn't want to keep everybody waiting. But the woman who owned it was so nice. The yarn was so beautiful. And she also, I don't think I got pictures of this, but she had a whole lot of hand knit sweaters and hats and socks and things for sale. And I think she made them all. And they were gorgeous, just gorgeous. I didn't want to take pictures because I felt self-conscious. Like, I didn't want to like be a jerk. So I didn't, but it was beautiful. There's probably pictures online. So this is my one souvenir from my trip to Iceland. All right, that is all I have today. I fully expected this to be a much longer episode, but I guess I got through everything more efficiently than I thought. I will see you in a couple of weeks. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned if you want for some bits of footage of some of the places that we visited in Iceland. Bye-bye now.
Something must be wrong. Anybody remember the name of this glacier? Sure. Why are there so many yokels?